Hello, welcome to UNtracing Trauma. This is JeGaysus, and I have the very beautiful Jannah here with me. Hi, Jannah. How are you?
Hey, Jannah and JeGaysus.
Ooh, J&J. I like it. It sounds like a alcohol brand, to be honest.
I'll have a shot of Jannah JeGaysus, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, hi. I'm very
Hi.
honored to be on this, what is it, live, your show. We'll call it your show.
My podcast YouTube thing. We don't have terms for it yet.
Yeah. Your new thing. This is a new piece of content. No, I'm super, this is cool. I don't often get to talk about this subject because I make content, but I make stuff about other things.
Yeah, so anyone who doesn't know you, how would you describe your content? I would describe it as hilarious sketch comedy with like a dark edge sometimes. I don't know how that's how I would do it.
Comedy, yeah, firmly in the sketch comedy. I've been doing it since 2016.
Wow.
Way before TikTok was even a thing. TikTok was called Musical.ly. That's how I've been sketching. And yeah, just been a weird job, but kind of fell into it because I'm an actor. And I left drama school and couldn't get a job. And I met an agent, like, long story, really short, met an agent and he was like, you should do comedy. And I was like, no, I want to do Shakespeare. Comedy. Go and get yourself a following or something on the internet. So I was like, all right. So I went, made a couple of sketches online. Do you remember a couple of years ago, there was a thing called the Floor is Lava?
Yeah, the reality show?
The show,
or like a game where people were talking about like online.
So the Netflix show basically came from the viral phenomenon, which was the game The Floor is Lava. So me and my friend Kevin, we played The Floor is Lava and it went like crazy viral. And like the Ellen show were like called us and were like, do you want to come on Ellen? And we were like, oh my God, we're going to get on the Ellen show. And then, because everybody started to play the game The Floor is Lava.
Yeah.
But then it went south and some girl, Floor is Lava, she jumped off a bridge. And then we started to get like negative press about it and being like, you made someone jump off a bridge. I was like, no, I didn't. We played a game and then they played the game, but then they played it on a bridge, which is not my fault. And Ellen sort of backed out of having us on. But
that was even before you got on the Ellen show.
Yeah, so we didn't get to do Ellen.
Jesus.
That didn't happen. But
that's traumatic. I thought we were going to be talking about religious trauma, and you come out here like, well, people are blaming me for others' lives.
It's crazy how the internet, sometimes you make something and you put it out there and you don't know the reaction and you don't know where it's going to go. It could snowball, become viral. The amount of times people have shouted at me, oh, hey, the floor is lava girl, or like whatever.
Yeah.
And also, I've been on the internet long enough now that things that went viral once, like 5 years ago, sometimes
they just circle back. Yeah.
And so a little clip is going viral again. I'm also known as the Five Guys girl because I used to interview celebrities couple of years ago. That was also my thing, like in
I remember this
funny ways. And I was interviewing some guys from Star Trek, and I accidentally, there was like a massive confusion, and they ended up sort of slut shaming me. It was funny. It was funny because I said, oh, if you could teleport anywhere in the world, like where would you go? And they weren't really answering. And I was like, oh, for me, I would teleport from like my bed to a Five Guys. And they were like, what? And I was like, Five Guys. I'd go from bed to Five Guys. And they were like, what do you mean? 5 men? What do you... I was like, the burger place. And they were like, oh.
They thought you meant like this was turning into a stepbrother situation.
Yeah.
Well, okay. They were like...
It was a genuine misunderstanding and they were hilarious and it was really, really funny. And that went viral. And then now that's going on... TikTok somehow got it and that's going on again. And people are like, so I'm either Floor is Lava girl or Five Guys girl.
It could be both.
But what a lot of people don't know about me, because again, I don't speak a lot about it, is that I guess I have a lot of religious trauma because I grew up in a very religious family, in a very secular little religious world. And now that I'm grown up and I'm unpacking a lot of it,
right,
and I'm realizing, oh wait, that like wasn't normal. Like,
that's not a normal thing.
Yeah, there was ceremonies and things that just other people just didn't grow up with that. And TikTok's actually really helped me because there are so many people who are also on this journey of like unpacking. And I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm early 30s.
I'm 18, I think.
Yeah, I mean, early 20s. But
I'm 32, so I've been around.
Yes, same. And I grew up in the peak era of like purity culture and like modern
DC talk.
like liberal Christian, which is not liberal at all. And yeah, so I was like, I went to Jesus camp every summer, and
Same.
it was very like Hillsong and Soul Survivor and all of that. That was my world. Growing up.
I relate. Okay, so I know that at least. I know the public facing side. So I'm going to give everyone a quick rundown for anyone who's new here, because it's obviously a new show. Basically what our goal is to talk about religious trauma, talk about personal stories, hopefully in a way that where other people are listening, they can kind of either see themselves in the stories, or if not, just a new perspective that they've never even knew was out there. They're like, whoa, that's not anything related to how I was, but essentially growing empathy just by being public, I guess. And I don't know, I can't take away everyone's trauma tomorrow, but I just want to make sure that if I can do anything with this platform, it's maybe highlighting voices. And through doing that, maybe somebody somewhere is sitting in a car listening to a podcast and they get out of an abusive relationship, or they learn how to love them, whatever the case may be. That's the goal. We'll see what happens. We won't know until I get an email saying, hey, this helped me. But, so now everyone has that. I do want to put out also a content warning, because since we are talking about trauma in different ways, we're still going to keep it light and fun-ish, as much as you can do during that. But I just want to say, like, it's probably not a kid's show. If you have kids, come back later and watch it. I don't know what I'm going to be saying. I know I have some things that definitely fall into, like, the sexual abuse category. So if that's something that triggers you, it may or may not come out. We'll see where it goes. Just be warned of that. All right. And with all those disclaimers aside, follow my Patreon and stuff, but we'll also do social links and all that jazz at the end. Mm-hmm. So let's get into, you said that you were raised in an environment that you didn't necessarily recognize as different from everyone else's in terms of just mainstream religion. So where were you born into a family that was religious? Where do you begin?
So I'm from London, England, and my parents they were both teachers at a Christian school in London. And that's like literally how they met. And then they had me. My mum comes from a Catholic family, and my dad comes from Protestant. And so my mum like left the Catholic church, and then got with my dad. My dad's parents, my grandparents, are like uber religious. Like we were Christian, but we had to change our clothes, pretend we didn't have a TV, and like basically hide loads of stuff from grandma and granddad. Like when we went to visit them, it was like I had to wear like button ups and long skirts. And
that was on the Catholic side? Your Catholic grandma?
My dad's Protestant, like, but they are
really?
Like, they were so basically my dad, I think my dad definitely had you should get my dad on here, he had a worse time than me. He was told that the world was going to end, and so there was no point in going to college, because what's the point, because Jesus is coming back and the world is going to end. At this point I think it was like 1976, so my dad spent a couple years, like his best years, literally traveling around telling everybody that the end days were coming. Like that was the
sure.
Spoiler alert, they didn't. So,
they didn't. Oh, well.
Days did not come. But that's my grandparents. And so I grew up, well, I thought I was in quite a relaxed environment, but because I wasn't as bad as my grandparents. But looking
right. When you have an extreme to compare yourself, you're like, okay, at least my parents aren't like making us do this every day. It's only when grandparents come over that we have to act cray-cray.
Like I wasn't allowed to watch things, like we weren't allowed to celebrate Halloween. We weren't allowed to watch movies. I remember my mum, she banned me from watching Matilda. Anything with magic was like, no. And I remember trying to explain to my mum that Matilda isn't magic. Her brain just works better than other people. So she's actually uber clever. It's not magic. And she was like, they were like funny about Harry Potter, funny about anything with witches and wizards. And I remember when I was about 9, some of the other mothers in my school kind of spoke to my mum and said, look, Jannah's being left out because she can't come to the Halloween party, she can't dress up. You're actually like excluding her from things. And so my mum had an agreement. I could go to Halloween, but I could only be a black cat every year. The same thing.
Oh my God.
On goes the whiskers. and in a black leotard.
Because obviously, I find that so funny, to be honest, because she was worried about you participating and not, like, what you would witness. You think most parents would be like, oh my god, what if she sees a zombie and has nightmares? She's like, no, what if you dress up as a ghost instead of a black cat and then your soul goes to hell? That's an interesting...
It's very, it was very like, you know, and then as we got older, my mum relaxed. So by the time it got to my youngest brother, I could take him trick-or-treating. And I was like, hey, I wasn't even allowed
Isn't that funny? Are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest. So
Isn't that weird? Same for me. Yeah.
I also was the only girl. And so I got treated differently, especially as a Christian-only girl, especially because the age that I went through the church was heavily on purity culture. Girls just got treated differently to boys. It was like we got told time and time and again, like, your purity is your biggest value. Like you can't let boys in, and you know, boys will be boys and men will take advantage.
They can't control themselves, God forbid. Yeah, don't put them in any situations where they might just black out and have, you know, relations.
And it was, and looking back now, and when I speak to other people that I grew up with in the church, and we talk about it, I'm like, do you remember when we had the talk and how we were, the analogies that were used are so disgusting, like the bucket analogy, like,
oh no, what's the bucket analogy?
Okay, so the bucket,
I have a lot of analogies, but I haven't heard the bucket analogy.
It was like, as a woman, you're a bucket, and if you allow people to come and like clean things or put things in your bucket's gonna get pretty,
the water gets dirty
and dirty. Yeah. And so we would talk, like, so it's like a bucket analogy, or
my mind went somewhere else, not to interrupt you, but when I heard bucket analogy and people come to, I was like, punch holes in the bucket and then your water leaks out. I was like, that is graphic.
No, it's like the idea that you are the vessel that can become unclean, and other people, they walk away from the bucket clean and shiny, and you left with the dirty water. Which I'm like, one, that doesn't make any sense, because later I found out that every single cell in your body regenerates and becomes a new cell every like 5 to 7 years or so. So every 5 to 7 years,
you're a completely new person.
Completely new person, which means you have a completely new cellular vagina. So basically, and it means
yes,
dirty, or like you don't hold the stains of something.
Right. Yeah, no one's gonna come in and do a pap smear and be like, oh, I think that was Cody left that mark there.
2013. Like no, and it even took a while for me to really let go of the whole concept of virginity. Like, virgin is a constructed cultural concept, and I was like, oh my god, it is. And like, it doesn't, it's in the same way as if we said, if we put value on people who had never cut their hair, and we go, oh god, this person's so valuable, they've never cut their hair.
Which some people do. There are some denominations that definitely do.
Okay, maybe I'm showing you something. Something where for the majority of the mainstream people, we'd be like, well, we don't really mind if they've had a haircut or if they haven't had a haircut. Like, they're no more less or more of a person. And it's the same thing with sex and virginity, but it was honestly held as like this huge beacon, and about how, you were like, ugh. And
that's so interesting. So I obviously was raised in America, and around the same time as you, definitely in my church, we also had purity culture being like the number one thing in terms of like youth conversations and any kind of teen groups. You know, it was always purity culture, purity culture, purity culture, and then whatever the regular pastor does. But that seems like the only reason that youth groups were formed was to speak about not having sex. But I also saw that repeated in American culture. So I'm curious to know, like, what was it like outside of the church in England? Like, was this like, because I had a lot of friends that were all about purity culture who never been to a church in their life. Like, it was so pervasive in the pop media that like everyone was just about this life. Like Jonas Brothers with their purity rings and shit.
No, that was I think that was an American. So it was, for us, it was the church and then the world. And
really? Okay.
Yeah, and everybody else was having sex. In fact,
they're just out there. What is it? Slagging? Is that what you say over there?
Slag. Everyone in the church was having sex as well.
I'm sure.
This is what is so like crazy about all of it. So it was completely normal in my world. You'd get to like 17, 18, and you'd find a boyfriend or girlfriend, and you would be with them for a very short amount of time, and then you would realize, oh, I want to have sex with this person. So then you got to get married.
Oop, run to the altar.
I got my second boyfriend ever at 17, and by 18 we were married.
Oh, wow.
Because that's what you do. And he was like 5 years older than me. So,
wait, so that makes him 24?
So he was like, he
23.
was 18, he was 24.
Okay.
We got married, and even now, I'm not married. I'm not married now. Mm-hmm. No one's married. But it was like the done thing. But I remember I missed my first day of university because I was still on honeymoon, and I turned up late to like register, and I was like, sorry, I had to come back off my honeymoon. Whereas everybody else was like, what? Like, it was, nobody gets married that young. In English culture, you just, you can have sex with who you want, and you can live with who you want. Like, in the mainstream, that's how it is. But in the church, it was very...
That's what I figured, just based on like my small knowledge of like, shows that made it over from across the pond. I'm like, it seems like a more liberated culture in terms of like the secular side of things, when it comes to sex. And like, but that's so sad that looking back on it now, did it feel like you were forced into it because you wanted to have sex, or did you just feel like the actual man, woman, wife was the only thing that like should be your first goal in adult life, that establishes your adulthood, to have a household?
So looking back, I had a difficult relationship with my mum. And it got tense when I got to like 18, being the only two women in the house. It got very tense, and I saw getting married as a escape route. I was like, great, I'll get married. I'll get out of the house. Yeah. Also, we really wanted to have sex. We waited until we got married, which was the worst thing that we could have ever done.
Everyone listen to that right there. Worst thing.
For my journey, we waited, and we actually waited, and because we thought everybody else was waiting, and afterwards I found out that all of the other couples who had got married had not waited.
Yeah.
and we were like, oh, and they were like, yeah, we were a bit naughty actually. Yeah. I was like, what?
But it's okay, because I knew I was going to marry him eventually. So.
Yeah, and I was like, what? So we got married, and then we realized that it didn't work. We didn't work. And because the man that I married was, he was a sex addict.
Really?
And part of and I was like, I was 18. So part of the issue, people go, oh, sex addict, great, that's loads of sex. And I'm like, no. The sex addiction works where it affects intimacy. So it basically means you can't have intimacy with someone. It's part of the whole, I don't know how it is in the brain, but basically there's a movie called Shame, and it with Michael Fassbender, and it shows this. Basically, he can have sex with anybody, and then he finally meets a woman that he likes, and he can't do it because of and it was the same with the guy that I married. So
interesting.
So we just like didn't have sex.
Okay. Because he wasn't able to like separate and objectify you as a tool for sex. Therefore, that makes sense. And in a bad way, it makes sense.
With the purity culture, he was like, one minute we can't be having sex because that's wrong and dirty, and you're supposed to be pure, and I'm gonna dirty you, and it gets into your like psyche. And so we didn't have sex. But sex is very normal and very natural. And so after like a year, or no, it's 10 months of not having sex, and I was thinking like, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't he want me? I remember asking at uni, being like, how do you get someone to have sex with you? And they're like, what do you mean?
They're like, your husband, you mean?
Yeah. And they were like, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Why don't you try dressing up? So I went, there's like a naughty lingerie shop in England, and I went and I bought like everything. I was like, this will do, I'll try this, and I don't know what that is, but I'll wear it. And like, anyway, and I remember I put it all on and like strutted into the living room, and and I got a no. And I was like, and I actually said, are you gay? Because if you are, that you need to tell me, because I don't understand.
It's a valid question, sure.
And I was like, okay, we have a problem. That's when I knew like we had a problem. And then my spidey sense, there's a movie called She's Just Not That Into You. It's like an old 2010s movie. And in the movie...
Oh, I was thinking of She's the Man with Amanda Bynes.
That's also an amazing movie. I love her. But She's Just Not That Into You. And one of the storylines is this woman who's trying to have sex with her husband and he just won. And they go, if he's not having sex with you, he's having sex with someone. And that's when I saw the movie and burst into tears. And that's when I knew I needed to check stuff. So I checked my husband's laptop and his phone and I found all the receipts and he'd been cheating. So... like
disclaimer, sometimes it might be asexual. It's also a thing. Just ace representation over here, but it's like not always cheating. But I'm so sorry, in your case it was.
But it was fine. In this case it was like it was token. I know, because I think I knew he wasn't asexual because before we got married it was like, I'm gonna do this to you and this is gonna happen, and I got basically served a menu that like never came out to the table. Like,
had he, I know this is, again, probably a personal question, but had he been with other women before you were married? I know you said that you, as a couple, waited.
Yeah, but... we waited as a couple, but he had previously had many people, and he was like, he joined the church, like, later. So,
isn't that funny how the expectation is on you and not on him to remain pure? Weird. It's almost like it's misogyny.
I mean, what's crazy is just to like rewind back in terms of like when I was really growing up. I remember being mortified because when I was first ever left alone with my first little boyfriend when I was like 14 years, I think we were babysitting, and I was like, oh, can my boyfriend come and babysit with me because I'm bored? So mum was like, yeah. And I remember my mum pulled me to one side before she left and she just went, remember, God is watching. And I was like, oh, like, horrendous.
Yeah.
And I was like, Mum, I'm 14. No. But also, like, just that thing in your mind, like, God is watching. And, you know, be careful. Don't be dirty. Don't be, you know, once you lose it, you can't ever get it back, and all this, like, crazy stuff. And, I mean, I actually ended up having sex at 15 with that first boyfriend. But I felt so bad about it. And, like, everything hurt because it was like, and like I'm just imagining a world where someone was just having like a nice time with their first love because they don't have to deal with all of the baggage of like, you're dirty, this is naughty,
the shame it creates, and like the way that like drills into your subconscious, and the way that you like have a picture of your own self-image is just so insidious. And like parents should not be like putting the importance of like, you have to remain pure. Like the importance should be on safety and consent always. It should be like, make sure that if it does happen, you feel like you're exploring in a good way, in a way that's like you're in the moment, and like don't worry about what it means after, as long as you're feeling like you're taken care of and you're not like being rushed or like harmed into anything. And that can't happen when the whole time in your head you're like, God's watching me, God's watching me. God, like there's no openness to that experience anymore. And that's so sad, because it's going to happen. Like you said, no matter what your parents raised you as, it still happens. So
you just end up feeling bad about it. And also, being uneducated. I didn't know. And like my parents, I couldn't talk to them about it. No way. And I remember being 15, 16 years old. And my parents were really, really strict with anything sexual on TV. We weren't allowed to watch any movies with sex in or anything like that. Violence, A-okay.
It's totally fine.
We watched really violent movies growing up. Like,
have you read the Bible? We're preparing for a war, so.
It's like, violence is fine. Sex, like, we could play with matches and fire. We could build fires in the garden. Like, we could do a lot of stuff that other kids maybe couldn't have. Like, we could have, like, me and my brothers could have toy guns and swords, and violence, A-okay. Fire, A-okay. Sex and kissing, no way. And I remember once my dad even putting his hand over my eyes when we were watching Love Actually. Do you know that movie, Love Actually?
I know of it, but I've never seen it.
Okay, it's like a famous British comedy movie, and there's a sex scene in it. And I remember him putting his hand over my eyes and in my head being like, Dad, I have sex myself. Like, this is like, why are you why are you not? I can't watch sex on TV, but he has no idea that I'm already. So I think learning from the experience and looking back, the type of parent that and the way that I would approach it would be completely different.
Yeah,
the kids they're gonna have sex like either way, so you might
And I
as well.
think that's probably the most important lesson, like the millennials as a generation have learned is like we, I think, are probably one of the first generations in a long time that's like overly committed to breaking generational curses and
Yes.
breaking generational trauma.
Yeah.
We're not perfect by any means, and like, you know, there's people doing the what do you call it? Soft parenting, or I don't know what the words are, but there's
Yeah.
always a debate on the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. But I think the most important part is that we're trying to do something,
Yeah.
anything to end that cycle. Because of course our parents are like, well, this is what my parents did, and their parents are like, well, my parents taught me that. And we're just like stopping it and questioning everything before we move forward. And I think that's great. Hopefully it'll change Gen Alpha's entire perspective on life and they can save the world because we're burning it down. Anyway, off topic. So, I mean, all of that, like, that carries into so many different aspects of your life. But what I would be curious to know is, so your relationship was already starting off on a rocky part, right? How did that relate back to your faith? Because I know, speaking with a lot of people, they have this image that they're sold to them of what their position's supposed to be, especially in a marriage, especially as a woman, where it's like you are there to make your husband happy. You are there to gratify your husband. Like, if you are a good Christian, God's going to reward you with a marriage and a good sex life and a sex life where you're desirable and everyone's having fun every time. And so did it feel like somehow you're letting down like your religion because of the breaks in your relationship? Were you like, oh God doesn't love me because he set me up in this unsexed marriage?
I felt like, no way, I waited, I did the rules, I did it right. Like, my friends who didn't do it, like, I was like, this doesn't make sense. I did it all right, and I got baptized, and I found a husband, and we stayed pure, and then I got this shit show of a marriage, and so much trauma from it, and I got cheated on. It broke my heart, and I would be like, I don't understand, God. Like, I did everything right. Like,
Sure.
I followed the code, I followed the rules, and then the only answer that you're allowed to sort of say, or what people say to you, is oh, well, you wouldn't be given anything more than you can handle.
Oh, of course.
Learning curve, and this is trust the process, trust his plan. And I'm like, this is a horrible plan. This is horrible.
Like, this is a hurdle that'll bring you closer. Your relationship's going to be so much stronger than anyone else's because you've gone through this early on.
Yeah, and I was like, but what was also horrible is, like, so privately we were so let's go back to the moment I found out that he was cheating, and I called him out on it, and he came back and cried. And looking back now, that's when I should have left. That's when I should have gone, no, like, you don't do this to me. I'm worth more than, like, sort of thing. And I didn't. You're under this huge pressure. I remember my mum being like, well, you can't leave. Like, no. You can't, but now again I look at it, my mom was in an unhappy marriage, and it was kind of like, no, you don't get to, because I didn't get to.
Right.
You don't get to.
Right.
Like, no. And I'm like, but I'm so miserable. And it's like, no. You made a promise, you made a vow with God as a covenant. And I was like, but he cheats on me, and he doesn't love me or show me any physical affection, and I feel like a piece of shit. And like, all of these like major, I'm so lonely. And they're like, no, you made a vow. And all of the close friends that we had told what was going on, because we were we were Barbie and Ken Christian couple. He was a tall, dark, good-looking guy. Together, everyone in the church was like, oh, you've got to run the youth thing, and we've got a mission over here, and can you come and do a prayer circle? And so we were like doing all this stuff.
You're the poster child of this is what God blesses you with. If you're like waiting till marriage, you're gonna get the hot guy and the hot wife, and you're gonna be 18 and making a house, and you're gonna be so godly. And
it was the complete opposite. It was like, it's hell. It was like, it was the most lonely, like soul destroying my confidence was, which then had a knock on for the rest of my 20s. I actually got out of, I stayed in that marriage for a further 3 years, because when I should have walked, I didn't. I should have walked at 20, and I stayed till I was 23. Wow. And I then went on a crazy like 6-7 year journey of my confidence had got so low that I then fell into the trap of people abusing me and treating me like crap because I'd lost all confidence from that first go of it.
Once you're like taught to be submissive in that way, you really do learn how to like stand up for yourself and set boundaries where people don't, like, I mean, just reminder for everyone else out there, no one is owed your time, let alone your personal space. Like, not even your time is owed. And not knowing that you can have those boundaries set is probably the biggest part that relationship robbed you of, in my opinion, from the outside looking in.
I remember looking back as well, because I'm like modern, all about equality, feminist. In fact, actually, the fire that really got lit under my feminist fire that got lit under my bum was when I started making online content. Because I started making comedy back in 2016 when there was no guys, there was no girls doing it in England. I could see some American girls like Laura Cleary. She was a big inspiration for me, and I saw her coming up and I was like, I want to do that, but there were no British girls doing any kind of comedy. So I online, you know, stuff it, I'll have a go, and did really well and started to get a big following on Facebook. I think was the first one.
On Facebook? Whoa.
Yeah, back in the day on Facebook.
Oh!
Facebook for videos, I was getting like hundreds of millions of views on Facebook. And but what was infuriating is that no one was crediting me for my videos. And they would credit the boys, but not me. Or if I did I invited the boy to be in my video, and I would write it, direct it, edit it. Everything was all mine. Credit. If someone, or like Unilad or Lab Bible or someone wanted to take this, they would credit the man and not me. There was like a Washington Post article about one of my viral videos, and it said viral clip by, and it said the man's name, and it said and woman, and I was like, oh my god. And why are you what?
They couldn't even like fact check just to get a name in there. Jesus.
And it was weird because before I was kind of, I felt like of opinion of like, no, women are equal now. Like we're good. Like we're doing it. Thanks previous sisters. Like we've arrived. And then realizing you're entering like the comedy world and being like, oh no, we haven't. I can't even get credited like basic stuff, or I get credited as and woman. But I kind of grew up with this. I'm the only girl of brothers, so I'm very like, yeah, I'm the big brother. But
sure.
In church, it really couldn't compute with me that they were like, you're the second, the man is the first, and the man makes all the decisions, and you have to sort of like trust your man to guide you. And I was like, yeah, but what if he doesn't know what to do? Or what if I know better? Or what if I'm, or like, surely it's a joint thing and we discuss it. And they were like, no, the way that it works is obviously he's going to take your feelings into account, but at the end of the day, he will decide what's best. And I'm like, it's not fair. Like,
it's not. And it's like
with like the reverend guy, and I was like, but like that's not fair. That's not an equal partnership. That's somebody being a Batman and Robin. That's not what I want to be Batman sometimes. You know, we take turns with the Batmobile. That's how I feel it should be. And something didn't sit right with me about that whole, like, we had quite a progressive church. We had a female reverend.
I was going to ask, is there a change in between how you, or what kind of church you were at when you were growing up versus what you chose to go to as an adult? Did you change denominations, or where were you in between that? So,
born in England, when I was 4 years old, my parents emigrated to Canada. So I grew up a little bit in Canada, in Cambridge, Ontario. And I didn't realize at the time because I was 4, but my parents went out as missionaries as part of a church. Okay. And in 1994, I think, there was a thing called the Toronto Outpouring, which was like a huge religious... I don't know what the word for it is now, but basically it was like a huge, like a Benny Hill event where everybody was getting slain in the spirit, and everybody... Okay.
So it was like a revival call.
It was the Toronto Outpouring Revival. And my parents were out there in Toronto with the church while that was happening. And I remember coming out of my Sunday school every Sunday, and it'd be really normal that all the adults were just on the floor. And like...
It's so scary.
Trying to wake my mum up and be like, Mom, like, I'm hungry. Can I, like, actually, I had an accent, so I was like, Mommy, I'm hungry. And, like, And then, yeah, all the parents were just like dead to the world, or like crying or shaking, or and I remember like very growing up in that environment. They're like, oh, so if anyone's watching and they're like, what are you talking about? So being slain in the spirit sounds incredibly violent, but it's basically when the Holy Spirit touches you, and it can manifest in multiple of ways. You either shake, cry, fall over, people lay hands, and you kind of like, yeah. And that was really normal for me to grow up in, because I was in this thing. And then we lived with the church. We lived on a base unit. We called it the base. And everybody lived together. This is where it gets a little bit culty. My friends are like, were you in a cult? And I'm like...
Yeah, as soon as it says we lived on a base. Whoop,
possibly.
Red flag, red flag.
So we lived on this base that I was told was an ex-army base. And so I was like, cool, we live on an ex-army base. And
militarization of church, that's what we need.
When it's worse than that, I found out a few years that, like, later, well, actually way later, my mum was like, oh no, it wasn't an army base, dear. It was actually an ex-woman's prison that got it got shut down for dodgy things, and the church got it cheap and then set the base up at the ex-woman's prison.
Yeah, lovely.
And so I was like, I was living in a prison? So we would live in our like dormitories, and we would have a mess hall where we would all go and eat. We'd eat together and just live together on this crazy thing. And it was kind of cool because I had like there was a bunch of kids that lived on the base.
You have built-in friends.
Yeah. We'd all like run around together in this little commune. But I remember it was like heavy into the sort of slain in the spirit stuff. And then we moved back to England, and my parents kind of stayed in Baptist. That was where they settled. And we had a very weird church, which was actually hilarious because we had, it was a complete mixture of ex-Church of England, like old middle-aged white people, and then really young Pentecostal. And we had a female reverend, an old white female reverend, and then we had a young guy who came over from Nigeria, and he was a Pentecostal reverend. And we had this weird culture thing where we would play one sort of hymny song, and then we would play one like Pentecostal song.
That's such a like mishmash in it. Like, I kind of like to see it. It's almost Unitarian in a way, like a female pastor, an immigrated Pentecostal preacher who's young. Like, it feels like making the new world.
We joked when he arrived because he was about 28, 29, and we joked, we were like, oh, he's looking for a wife. And then within a year, my friend Lucy, who was 17, had married him. But in fairness to them, they are still happily married, and they have 2 kids, and actually
that's good.
That was fine. But like, that's part of the...
Still a little concerning that, just does feel like a pattern of, pastors who just only date in their congregation. I think that's
and especially like under 18. Like,
under 18 in their congregation.
It's like... But yeah, so we had so I actually I enjoyed that church, and there was a level of growing up where I didn't enjoy some of the messaging and like the kind of women are low and no sex and stuff. But I enjoyed the social aspect too, because we could go to camp, and we'd go to Christian camp, and we'd go to like there's tons of they're always just trying to keep Christian kids busy so that you're not having sex. So there was always something to do. There was a mission. We'd go and paint windows, and this whole idea that you got to serve, which I think also I realize now as an older adult that I learned from an early age, like if I want love, I have to serve. Like I have to do stuff. I have to do something actively.
I think that's an important realization right there. I was gonna say, well, firstly, the community is how they get you. Like that's how, even if it's not a cult, that's how any religious institution works, is by forming the in group versus the out group to make it feel like you're loved. And then like those relationships that you develop are genuine relationships. They're not being forced on you through verses. They're definitely the positive benefit that comes along with being a part of a community that has similar views and values, because then you get to just have relationships that wouldn't be there otherwise, and they trick you into staying into those relationships. But the fact right there that you learned that these works that were so pressed or given like actual spiritual weight to like, you are the service you provide, and then realizing like that's actually something that got built into your personality. Like, how did you come to the realization like, wait, this is something that has been
So
taught or groomed to me.
it was when I met my current partner, and he was the first. Like, I decided to do a different approach, and when I dated him, I took it slowly rather than this like rapid fire. Like, I need someone to love me because
I'm nothing without a husband.
Yeah, energy, like and I remember being like, I'm gonna take it slow, and also I'm not gonna like do anything, and I had no idea. He just kept like wanting to date me and be around me, and he fell in love with me, and it was the first person who'd fell in love with me without me having to do anything, and I was like, it was so weird, and I was like, I haven't helped you, because I also rescued a lot of men. That was my problem. I'd be a rescuer. Like, I sniff some trauma and depression. Hi, right there. I'm lovely and I'm positive. So yeah, so it was the first time I put a boundary up and was like, I'm not here to rescue you. I'm not here to help you. I'm not here to serve you or do anything. I'm just want to hang out with you. And to have somebody, it was really unnerving to be like, but I haven't done anything. But like, why do you like me?
Why are you here? Yeah.
Like, why are you still here? I haven't done anything for you. And he's like, what do you mean? You don't have to do anything for me. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's really unusual. But now, yeah, I was like, oh my God, I was just desperately trying to do things for people, serve people, always put other people before you, and give your best clothes to the poor, and like, it is martyr yourself, basically.
Yeah.
In every
exactly
in your life, in your finances, in everything, and feel really bad if you don't put yourself first. It took me until I was like 30 years old to be like, no, I'm putting myself first. You know, put your own oxygen mask on before everybody else.
Right.
Whereas the church is the opposite. It's like, serve absolutely everybody
until you fall over and die.
Like, and hold your breath while you do it.
And I feel like that's, again, back to just like the unweighted sexism that's in church. Like, I feel like that's so much more heavily expected on a woman than it is in a man's role. Because, as you said, there's this umbrella method of God, the church, husband, and wife. And so your job is always going to end up on that subservient level, whether it's to your pastor or to your husband, or like there's always somebody above you that you're supposed to be doing things for when that model of church exists. So it gets ingrained. It gets ingrained into everything. And
what was really upsetting was I basically ended up getting kicked out the church when that marriage ended. So after I stayed in the sad marriage for 3 years, and it became like a shell of a person. I remember my friend took me shopping, and she was like, oh my God, I was like a tight leather skirt, something so out of my comfort. I became really averse to looking attractive. I was like, well, you know, because I'd been like shunned and cheated on and so many times and everything. I had a phobia of trying to look attractive. It was really weird. So I remember it was one time when I realized I had a problem was when I put on this tight leather skirt in a shop, and my friend was like gassing me up and being like, oh my God, you look amazing. And I was like, get it off, get it off, get it off. I don't. And my hands were sweaty, and she was like, are you okay? Like, what's happening? You look so sexy and amazing. And I was like, no, I don't. I can't. And I was like, I think I have some sort of issue here. With attention.
Just the attention, not even from a male gaze, just attention in general around that like attractiveness or you being praised.
So uncomfortable with it, because I'd been rejected for so long, for so many years, and any time that I'd attempted to have intimacy or attempted to dress up, I was like kind of scarred. I was like, okay, you try putting on the sexiest thing you've ever put on and walk in a room and someone say no, like. It guts you.
Sure.
And I remember I returned that underwear. Sorry, just to go back to I returned the underwear to the and I returned it all. And I remember the woman went, oh, why are you returning it? And I was like, oh, my husband didn't like it. And she was like, is he crazy? And I was like, yes, he is. Yes.
Be like, I would have blamed it on the underwear. I would have been like, your shop is broken. Like, all of this apparently is just, nope. Fix it.
So I basically, after 3 years, and so this is what happened. So now I have a huge learning curve. If you stay in an unhealthy relationship where your needs aren't being met, and the basic human needs of connection, intimacy, sex, and if you stay in that, I thought, it's okay, I'll power through. You know, I made a promise, I made a vow. Also, everybody and their best friend told me I was too young to get married. Anyone not in the church, anyone I met, like my whole experience of getting married was actually horrible because I went wedding dress shopping and I was an 18-year-old girl and they'd be like, what are you doing in here? I'm getting married. They're like, really?
Oh.
The sale rack's in the back. And I'm like, no, I'd like to buy a proper one. Or anywhere, trying to choose a venue. They talked to my mum over me. It was like, it was crazy. So I had this whole stigma as well of like, no, you have to make this work because everybody told you that you couldn't do it. And I was like, how can it work? But actually, the fallout is if you stay in an unhappy place and the other person, I was begging him to get therapy for his sex addiction and he wasn't ready to go. And I'd call up therapists and they're like, we're a little concerned that it's you calling and not your husband because really it needs to be the person going to therapy when they're ready to. And he wasn't in that space. So anyway, I ended up getting a place at drama school after university. And I went to drama school, and I also in drama school they make you do a lot of exercises to like pull on things and be able to like draw from your memories. And I remember we did this one where I was drawing on a particular memory, and I kind of had a breakdown in the studio, and the teacher had to stop, and she was like, "Oh, we've touched on something there," and I'm like, "Yeah." So anyway, I was living in this really low self-esteem, really lonely, and a guy who was on the drama course kind of came in and treated me like everything that I needed, found me interesting and amazing and whatever. And I just fell in love with this guy because he was everything that my marriage was not. And so as the year was ending, he confessed to me that he was in love with me, and I was like, oh my God, like, no. And I decided to leave my marriage, basically. He gave me, I don't think you should ever leave a relationship straight to another one. I think that is
that's a good advice, I think.
But at the time, because I was so...
But you're already mentally out. You were already out of that relationship, really.
I was so so like low that at the time I don't think anything else would have ever made me leave apart from the like the inspiration from somewhere else where I was like, no, I want that. So I left, and I told my husband I was leaving him for this other guy, and weirdly his initial reaction was, yeah, I get it. Like,
he's like, I'm surprised you're still here.
I get it. But once the church had found out that I'd walked out of a marriage for another man, I was, that film Easy A?
Yeah.
With Emma Stone?
Scarlet Letter.
That was me. Oh my God. No. Kicked out the church. Gossip.
Oof.
It was horrendous. All of my friends who I thought were my friends, who were friends, didn't know how to react or treat me. I was the first person in the whole of the sort of church social group that had got a divorce. Since then, it's been like, 13 years? No, not that long. 10 years? I don't know.
35, maybe. Who knows?
86 years ago. But since then, it's been 10 years, and a whole bunch of them have got divorced. It is quite normal.
Sure.
But I was the first one. Nobody knew what to do. It was. Was
it a type of church that preached against divorce, like, openly, as like, this is the one thing that modern world will say is okay, and not not Jesus hates divorce? Was it that kind of church?
My parents were like, you can't, it's just not an option. All of my friends were trying to, in fact, I'd already left, and like, I think it was 5 weeks later, some of the friends tried to do an intervention and put us back together and sat me down, and I had to face him and like say again that I still wanted to leave and I was done. And
that is so re-traumatizing. Jesus.
I remember it was the time of the Olympics when London hosted the Olympic. No,
2008.
Was it the Olympics? Yes, and we did the big ceremony, and everyone was partying, and like London was on fire with.
Oh, not 2008.
No, 2012. 2012, yeah.
Yes.
And everybody was partying and having this great time, and like the England, it was this huge patriotic moment. And I remember that I came out of this like intervention. I was like sobbing in my car. Everyone's like, boo 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 England, and like it was awful.
I want to I need you to make that a scene in the memoir movie of your life, just
Oh my God, it was
the balance of trauma and comedy, where it's just the absurdity and
yeah.
value of life.
So I left. I had nothing. I remember I had to sleep on my parents' couch because I hadn't lived with them since I was 18. I had to sleep on my parents' couch for a few weeks before I found somewhere to go. And I remember my mum got drunk at Christmas and made a joke about me being a whore. And I was like, wow, okay, so we're here. Yeah, all of the friends that were in the friendship group, some of them to this day have never spoken to me. And I was
Isn't that crazy?
We spent like 5 years
Isn't
going
that
to the
sad?
events, and I've been to your baptism, and yeah, everyone kind of was like, oh, I got this easy A. And I remember there was one friend that I had from childhood who she left the church. She exited around the same time I got married, so she got about 18. And now she's like incredibly free, and we talk now about do you remember how crazy it was when we were told about but so she got out, and so when I got divorced, for her it was actually, she was like, oh, welcome back, you're out,
Get on this other side, please.
exciting. You can
we have fun here.
yeah, welcome to your new life where there's no rules and no one's slut shaming you. And I was friends with her, and I was friends with her partner, and we were at a wedding where a lot of the old church lot were, and I was dancing with her partner. They're actually in an open relationship, they're very trusting, and I'm friends with both of them, but I was dancing with her partner. And we were dancing in the wedding, and another girl from the old Christian thing came up to my friend and were like, be careful with that one, she steals husbands. And my friend turned to her and was like, shut up, she's my friend and I trust her. And so she relayed back to me, she was like, by the way, that girl just told me. And I was like, I left my husband, and somehow that turned into, I'm a husband stealer. I was like, I've never stolen anyone's husband in my life.
I might as well start though.
And this is a girl who'd come to my birthday party. I was like, everyone was so two-faced.
That's the thing is we were just talking about that community aspect not only 10 minutes ago, and I was saying that's how they keep you, is by selling you on these things, and you do form genuine relationships, but that relationship only goes so as far as you staying inside the group. As soon as you're out, as soon as you're made an outcast, the entire friendship falls apart. And it's just so sad that the one little thread that can be keeping together just an entire beautiful community of people that could support each other, sometimes it's just based on, I wouldn't even say just circumstance, but sometimes it's based on the perceived notion that we're better than the outsiders. And then as soon as you become the outsider, you're not seen for your humor or your kindness or whatever it is. It's just, you don't believe the same, and therefore everything's no longer human about you.
It's weird because on one hand, you have a weird paradox here, because we were told that everyone's welcome to the church. And in fact, the more wayward that you are, the more of a catch it is to bring you to the church. But if there was an ex-junkie pregnant prostitute who wandered into the church, it would be like, girl, come here, it's fine.
All the save points.
But if somebody from in the
That's 15 points.
yeah, yes, extra heaven points. But the church didn't know what the hell to do when somebody from in the ranks left their marriage for another man. They didn't for some reason it was like, oh no. But I was like, but if I was coming in the front door, you'd be all like, it's okay. But because I was in there, it was crazy. But I do have to say, kudos to that female reverend, because I remember in that time when everyone was telling me that I didn't have a choice, that I had to just sort of stick it up and whatever, and I was like, it's not working. I've been in it for 4 years. He's not doing therapy. He's not playing ball. I can't make this work. He actually makes me feel horrible as from what I've been through. And I remember that I got a visit from that reverend lady, just to a welfare check, to be like, yeah, okay, so the church is in flames about what you're doing, and she's like, I want to check in on you. And she was the only person who said, you don't have to stay. And I was like, what? And she's like, so she had divorced. She was a divorcee as a reverend.
Sure.
She was a wise lady, and she said, you can stay, then we'll support you, but you can also leave. That is an option for you. You do not have to stay married. It's not 1500.
Good, yeah.
And
Good on her though for like
yeah,
reminding you of like, hey, you're a person and
he
you
was
have
the only
options.
person who sort of said you have a choice, like, and it's yours to make. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's mad. And that's mad that it came from the reverend as well, like the person at the, rather than anybody. And I was like, okay, she's white. So
I feel like that's actually more common, hopefully, rather than not, that the reverend is at least usually the person to see through the BS because
yeah,
they've seen so many different things. It's usually like I feel like the members of the church that work themselves up into like this supreme piety, this like assumption that this is the way to be holy, and the reverend's like, because the
yeah.
reverend knows they just like got drunk last weekend or something. You know what I mean? Like they see their insides of their heads. They're not superior figures. Like you said, she herself was divorced. She knows things go on. She understands what it's like.
Sucky
Yeah.
marriage. Like I can see you're miserable and it's okay to start again. So I did, and I literally started again. And then I remember that I had a very close friend who for years, and she was like my best friend in the church, and she was getting married the year after, and I was going to be her maid of honor, and I was really excited. And then my ex-husband was going to be his best man, so it was going to be and it was like, oh, but it's like a year after, like I can personally, I'll be okay with it if he's okay with it, like it's your day, whatever. And then I remember one day I got a handwritten letter basically disinviting me from the wedding, and I was banned from the wedding because apparently it would cause too much drama for me to be there, and it was going to distract from the wedding, and he was allowed to go, but
Right. Well, because you're the husband stealer, so.
I'm a crazy husband stealer, and that gutted me. Like nothing. I was like, oh my god, like okay, I'm excommunicated, like fully, like I cannot go to events, I'm not allowed to take part. And I thought the fairest thing to do would be like, okay, if we're having a drama between me and him, then okay, we both don't get to go, fine, do your wedding.
Yeah.
I love you, I want your wedding to be, but also she didn't say it to my face, she didn't have enough guts, she sent me a letter disinviting me. And actually that was probably in a way, one of the best things to do, because my mum had been not on my side until she saw me get the letter, and then I think and then she was like, okay, I'll be a bit more on your side, because that's shit. Like that's really shit to get a letter from your best friend.
I guess that's an upside. We can look at it like that.
So my mum softened, and then became angry. She had a new person to be angry at rather than be angry at me. She would be angry at them for like.
That's helpful.
So that was a little bit helpful. But yeah, it was
That's a lot.
That was a lot.
It's like it's a very down period, especially when it's already in your 20s, and like the world is shit when you're in your 20s. I don't care what anyone says. Like you can have all the fun you want to out there, but I don't think I've ever really met anybody who's not going through some crazy world altering experience in their 20s. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from.
Oh, my 20s are beautiful. I'm so glad.
Right.
I see 30 as a reset, and it was like, oh,
yes,
I've got to level 3.
Yes. 100%. I agree with that.
Left turns. The relationships that I was in after that were not healthy. It was not good. And
well, that's what I want to touch on too, because so as we're wrapping up here, because we're kind of at the hour mark.
Oh my gosh!
So let's. I want to kind of figure out what that transition. You said those relationships weren't necessarily healthy directly after, but then you did also say that like you've learned how to set boundaries. So what was that in between stage? Where did you learn to gain that self-confidence back and like treat yourself as you wanted to be treated? Like how did you allow yourself to do that?
Yeah, I stopped people pleasing. Oh, I also took myself to therapy. That I can't say that it was all me. I found
therapy helps.
Amazing therapist, and now if any of my friends are in crisis, I pick them up, put them in the car, drive them to the therapist, and I pay for the first session. And I'm just like,
oh,
like get in there, you like pass the baton on.
I bet your therapist loves you just bringing you in business like that.
I literally sent them like 5 people.
Nice.
She was amazing. I found this amazing woman because I know that, and I would say try therapy. And if your therapy, you don't gel with your therapist, it's like dating. Try another one. I don't want to hear it if you say, "Oh, therapy doesn't work for me." I'm like, unless you try at least 3 or 4, then you haven't. It's like going on a date and being like, dating art isn't for me, or men aren't for me. I'm like,
No, that makes sense.
So I happened to stumble across someone who was amazing. I was dirt poor. I had no money, and she said that she would do a session for me for £20, which is like, and I would always run over, and she'd let me run over. And she worked with me for 9 months. And I remember at the end of the sessions when she was like, we've done really a lot of work, and I think you're good. And she was like, would you like to listen to some of the notes that I wrote about you on the first session? I was like, go on. And she was like, she told me some of the stuff that I was saying to her on the first session. And oh my God, I can't remember what they were about, but the way I was describing myself, talking about myself, it was so low confidence. I had no confidence in men. I had no confidence with anybody loving me. I felt invaluable. Being kicked out of the church, being my best friend. Like, it was like rejection. And she worked with me to put boundaries in place and to unpick like why that hurt, or maybe why not that I allowed, but she also gave me ownership, because there are certain things where actually people can treat you bad, and I'd be like, this boy is just awful and he just treats me awful, and she's like, yeah, but you also repeatedly allow him to treat you awfully.
Sure.
And like, there is an element where you're choosing. I was choosing to be with anyone because I didn't want to be alone, rather than be alone. And I was like, I'll just be with anyone.
Right. And
it wasn't until I was like, enough, I'm done. I'm actually done. Ironically, it was the last boyfriend I had, who was very quick dating. He totally love bombed me. He was my ideal man. He actually, after running away from the church, it was a few years later, he was a Christian. And so he took me to Hillsong. And it was a different vibe from the other churches. And I was like, no, this is cool. This is modern. This is like, they welcome gay people. They like, this is totally different. Like, you can be a divorcee here, and this is cool. This is so.
It's hip. They wear sneakers.
Yeah, it's so cool. And this guy he love bombed me hard, heavy narcissist. And he was projecting. He was using Christianity to project how kind and amazing he was, when actually he was just so insecure. He love bombed me. He told me God told him I was his wife. And
I hate that.
He was like, you're my wife. And I said,
I had a dream about you, and you've been placed here by God.
He made me meet his mom like really early on, and was like, yeah, God told me you're my wife. Like, this is it. I haven't had a girlfriend in 4 years until I found like this. All my friends are like, you found the one. I got love bombed hard. And then one day he just turned around and was like, yeah, it's not working. I don't love you anymore. I was like, and then I was like, do you know what? I'm done. This is worse than being with no one. I finally realized that, like, I was like, you shouldn't be crying all the time.
Right. If you're made to feel like shit all the time, maybe just being neutral and not feeling good or bad is a good thing for a while.
The Miley Cyrus song, like we didn't have those songs. We still had like all those sort of Celine Dion songs where you're like, come back to me, I need you.
Oh no.
So it wasn't only until I kind of realized, like, actually no, this is shit. I'd prefer to be with no one than with you. And I kind of went on my own, and I honestly thought that I acted like a man. I was like, I'm just gonna be with who I want to be. I'm gonna tell them to go when I want them to go. My heart's gone off, and I was like, I also think I'm dead inside, though. I think I'm done with relationships and whatnot. And then it was after being in a few months of being in this, and it was the first time I was like really properly single, not like finding someone and then quickly finding someone else to date.
Right. Not serial dating just to like keep yourself entertained.
I was like, no, I don't want to be. I don't like. No, I was like, romance isn't for me. I'm off. And it was only when I was in that space, when I wasn't looking for anyone and I didn't want anyone, and I was like, no, this is all about me. That's when I actually found someone who, and that's when I was like, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to date differently. I'm going to date slow. I'm going to do a boundary. I'm not going to save you. I'm also not going to disclose, because I realized my therapist made me highlight that what I do is I did a baby bird syndrome, where I would find a guy and I would like broken baby bird, and you're kind of, you you overspill really quickly your trauma very quickly to them, and so they want
That's me.
So
Writing this down. I'm gonna get your therapist's number after this because apparently.
great. But the baby bird syndrome, I realized I did do it. So you know, I would be like manic crazy pixie girl, and by the second date I would have told them like, yeah, so I got married and he cheated on me and then it was really crazy, and then I got excommunicated, and people were like, whoa, you've been through a lot, and I'm like, yeah, and like I would kind of overshare, and it would create this sort of vulnerable little girl that they would want to like look after, but they weren't. Which is fine when you're it creates attraction and intenseness very quickly, which I was very good. I was very good at getting people, and I knew that if I could be baby bird and sort of share all my trauma, I could also get them to unlock their trauma very quickly, and so we would kind of trauma bond. Right? And then that's what it's about. And then a couple months into the relationship, it would be like they kind of lose interest in me because the baby is very attractive to be like, oh, I'll save you, but it's also a lot of work. And when you actually work in, I'd have a lot of nightmares and things like it, and so this time I was like, I'm going to date differently. I'm not going to try and be with, we're going to see each other once a week. And also I'm not going to disclose a lot of the trauma. Like I'm going to try that for now. And I'm going to like layer that in later. And
I think that's huge. Yeah. Cause then you're building a relationship based on like, I don't want to say superficial knowledge, but you're basing a relationship on actual personality traits and not getting hung up on like, oh my God, whether you're saving or even if it's being proud of the person, like, wow, this person really persevered over whatever they had to survive. Like that's, if you only view a person as what's happened to them in their past, you can't really respect them for who they are right now. Yeah. So I think that's such a good thing for you to do.
I was like, one, I was scared of being boring. I was scared of not being able to serve them. I was scared of not being able to help them. Or like all of the things in my toolkit that I was really good at, like all of my things where I was like, I can make people fall in love with me real quick, but use any of them. And so it was a really nice surprise when we actually bonded, when we created a friendship out of like the now, not the then. And it's different and it's lasted, and we're together 5 years and we just bought a house. And
congratulations.
Really good, really healthy, and I've got really good at setting the boundaries and like super trusting. I was so untrusting from when I got cheated on at the beginning. I'd be the girl that would check phones because my gut would be telling me all kinds of things, or I would be the hyper anxious if they're out on a night out. Of course, I called it the Dr. Pepper effect. What's the worst that could happen? I would Dr.
Pepper.
Do you remember that?
How does that relate to Dr. Pepper?
So the Dr. Pepper advert where back in the day when they were like, Dr. Pepper, what's the worst that could happen? And you swig a Dr. Pepper. Google it.
I think this might be a UK thing.
Was it? Oh, because it's like American Dr. Pepper. Okay, well, in the UK, there was a big commercial series called Dr. Pepper, What's the Worst That Could Happen? And it was like, if you swig a Dr. Pepper, being like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? And then like an avalanche would happen or your car.
Oh,
no. So I call it the Dr. Pepper. My brain would do the Dr. Pepper effect, and I go,
okay.
It would replay whatever the worst thing. And so now I cannot believe me. I look back at me then and I'm like, oh my gosh, you were obsessing and worrying about things that you're not in control of. If my partner's going to cheat on me, that's on them. It's nothing to do with me. It doesn't, it's no reflection on how, like, I owned so much of being rejected because I wasn't sexy enough. I wasn't good enough. And actually I was like, do you know what? That was on him.
That's all his stuff. Yes.
That was his stuff that I was trying to like add on my. So now I don't do any of that. I'm so much.
I'm so proud of you.
And
letting go of that is hard for so many different reasons. I mean, like religious upbringing aside, but like past abuse and past being treated like shit aside, like it's just hard to remember, especially when you love somebody and especially when you're in a relationship, that like they are their own autonomous person, and what they do, even if it's, like, oh, why doesn't he want to cuddle with me at the end of the night and stuff like that, that can all be removed because it has nothing to do with you. And so much of that is built into our brains where, like, we are the center of our universe, for better or worse. That's how we view things. And it's really important to step back and realize, like, that's your partner's decisions. Like, it doesn't mean you're a bad person because he gets hot at night and doesn't want to sleep next to you. Like, sometimes it's just not about you not being worth it. So it's give yourself that grace and talk about things from a more, more removed situation.
I recommend, if you can't afford therapy, the next best thing is a YouTube channel called School of Life. They're a psychology channel, and they do the most amazing short little animated videos on relationships, on relationship psychology, like why you are attracted to your partner, why you fall out of love with your partner, the whole anxious avoidant attachment. So you're either anxiously attached to someone or you're anxious avoidantly attached to someone, and normally the two of them will be together, regardless of your gender or whatever. It's anxious and avoidant go together.
As soon as you said that, I had one couple in like my real life, like one of my friend couples just boop, popped in. I'm like, I know who that is.
And so I'm anxiously attached, and my partner's anxiously avoidant. So when he gets stressed, he wants to avoid, he wants space, he needs time.
Yeah.
When I get stressed, I want to attach, and I need to, do you still love me? Like, no, but do you still love me now? Because you might have changed your mind in the last 30 minutes.
You could have changed.
And so we've learned, because we're both like this, we've learned a communication system where I'm like, if he's in a bad mood, I'm like, okay, are you in a bad mood because something happened, or is it because of me? If it's because of me, you need to let me know. If it's not because of me, can you let me know, and I'll just let you have the day. And he's like, no,
yeah,
I just need to be. And I'm like, cool, see you later. Or if
that's
it's
great.
Me, if it's me, are you ready to talk about it now? If not, we'll talk about it later. I'll schedule that in, and we'll need to address this. Like, I'm just like, let's address. I'm bored.
I love that. I think that's healthy as hell.
Yeah, like it just gets around. It gets around it. So once you understand, like, and you look at yourself and you go, how do I click? Why do I click? What am I anxious, avoidant, anxiously? How do I react to stress? How does my partner react to stress? And just, communicate it out.
I love
so much better.
Well, I'm so excited that you're like in a new place. Literally, you're in a new place with this new house, and like you've been able to do so much work. And I think that's amazing. I think we're gonna have to wrap it up here, but I'd love to have you back anytime. I want to do like an entire episode just on this like Barrack cult situation someday with you, because like I want pictures, I want stories. No, but thank you so much for coming on. I want to give you a chance to like talk about anything that you have coming up, anything that you want the interwebs to know. Obviously, drop like your TikTok handle, your Instagram handle. And then if you're like, I don't know, going on a world tour I should know about, please tell me.
So my socials are, it's at Funny Old World. So like, and Funny's old, like OLDE, like ye old, Funny Old World. Because I do a lot of stuff about ancient history now. That's like my passion. I did like 5 years of pure comedy being silly. And then the last 2 years, I'm like really heavily into like Atlantis and loads of stuff like that. So Funny Old World is like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and I'm not so silly over my YouTube. I'm quite serious, but that's me, and I'm out and about, and I'm also an actor. So there's a TV show that I'm in called Deep Heat. I don't know if you can get it in America, but you can.
Deep Heat?
Yeah, you can. It sounds like a porno, but it's not. It's a show about wrestling. I play a girl who wants to become a professional wrestler, like WWE.
Oh. Okay.
But you can get it on a thing called BritBox, which is like it's like an Amazon for England. I don't know if,
we have that here. It's a subscription service, but yeah.
So it's on BritBox, so you can watch.
I'm writing this down.
DP, and I'm about to start filming a show, but I can't say what it is. But it's for it's for Amazon, so we'll be.
Congratulations on both. Ooh. Well, then I will stick around and stalk you until that one's announced.
Serious acting. You need to go and do comedy online.
I mean, hey, it starts somewhere, and then
years later,
just keep wiggling your way, fighting your way into every room you can, aggressively. That's what people don't tell you enough, is get out there and yell.
I love your TikToks, and I started to follow you because I instantly was like, oh, this guy, we've grown up in the same space, and I get it, and I love it. I'm still fascinated by theology and the Bible, but I can look at it now from very different, like I can separate what's sort of historical, what's cultural, and what's like crazy humans in the church being like...
I find it from being outside, like going to church and like not being in a religious institution, I find once you're removed from that, like religion becomes so much more interesting, like just like on a meta level. I don't know why it is, but I've never been more interested in religion in my life until after I was out of church. Because like doing the whole missionary thing, doing the whole Bible study thing, it felt like, I guess like maybe the results are like the expectations were too high. Like it's this or I'm going to live in hell forever. So maybe it was the pressure that took out the fun, but it was also like just like the need to make sure you were doing it right and like trying to apply that to saving souls, all that. Once that stress is removed, you get to like kick back and just be like, oh my god, like Nero was on some shit. Like it's totally different.
Also, just when I got in the last few years, when I've got into ancient history, when I've researched ancient history and I've researched ancient civilizations way, way, way before the Bible, I realized like, oh my God, I thought the Bible was like the oldest book in the world and the original text. And when I see that so many stories in the Bible are literally lifted off older, more ancient texts from Sumeria and like the
Babylon, Mesopotamia,
story of Noah,
Canaanite.
yeah, it just goes back even further, and then new science is coming out. Like anatomically correct humans are now confirmed over 300,000 years old, and so then I started to think, well, why for 300,000 years humans were like rolling around, and God didn't do anything until the year zero, you know, when Jesus
Yeah.
I'm like that. I'm like that doesn't. Something's not computing. Like my understanding of the universe and time, the timeline of history, has expanded so much that actually Christianity is so new and so baby. I'm like, oh, it's not this old thing that we thought it was.
I did a video about that on TikTok just the other day where it was the audio where like, no, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, yes, it is. That one. And I did a video that was just talking about religion. I was like, every religion you've ever heard of started as another religious idea first. You can go back forever because as far as we know, Homo sapiens like specifically have a religious part of our brain that socially evolved to help us develop communities, develop imagination, plan for the future, all these things that are like really beneficial for a society that also just make up religion. So as far as we know, as soon as Homo sapiens started, we were already religious because the species before us was religious. So like, we won't even be able to know where it started because literally anything you've heard of came from somewhere else first, because it's not before even written language was developed. Yeah. They were doing something with religion. So, and then I literally got a comment on that that said, not Islam. Islam just started out of its own thing. And I was like,
no, honey, no. It's old.
What? Not Islam, especially Islam came out of a whole bunch of other religions.
Yeah, that's under the Abrahamic umbrella. Religions all claiming the same granddad. It's crazy what people, because what is scary is you will only absorb what you're fed. And if you live in a world where, Islam's your thing, or Christianity's your thing, or atheism's your thing, like, you will only know the perimeters and the walls of that world. And it's actually scary. I recommend just stepping out of it, look at it from the other side, look at other people's religion. I've questioned the Quran, I've questioned things, and I'm interested in it. Research it. Google it, research it.
Be interested. That's how you grow, is by just, like, learning, like, why were they doing this? Why did they think this?
Yeah.
It's the why of it all that teaches you, not the don't do this.
I had a video.
Don't do this on a Sunday.
Maybe I will have to come back to talk about this, but I've got a video on my YouTube channel all about ancient Egyptian similarities with the Bible and how it crosses over, and how the original God, originally Elohim and Asherah, that it was God was man and a woman, and then they erased Asherah, the woman, and it's just... I was like, oh my God, they've erased the female god.
And Asherah is still very much in the Bible, which is really fun to point people back to. Like, they didn't take her out completely. In the very early days, in like the 800s and the priestly days, when they have those sources, they were very much still focused on making sure that people knew you could worship Asherah as long as she wasn't first. You have to make Yahweh, the Elohim, the highest.
Yeah, and then...
But Asherah is still around. You can keep your Asherah poles, and like that's still in the Bible until around the time where Moses supposedly comes back in, and it's like, no,
but it makes
no more worship of anyone.
Total sense that they kind of morphed Asherah into the Holy Spirit, which is why the Holy Spirit is like the more gentle, mothering, whatever. But
it's fascinating. I love it. I love that you love it, because this is like what I do all day, every day.
Oh, I love it. And I think I recommend that for anyone, even if you think that, okay, this is the perimeter of my life, just step outside it, look back. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the not inaugural episode of Untracing Trauma. I don't know when this one's gonna air. I don't even know if I'm keeping this piece in the actual part, but so we will let you know. I was like, thanks for episode 2, but it might also be episode 3. I'm gonna throw it out the first time I don't have an episode live scheduled. So that's what we're gonna use this episode for. So I'll keep you on your feet for that. And then, okay, so for the outro, for anyone else listening, obviously go follow Jannah. She's amazing. The history is great. The humor on point. She's gorgeous. Everything. You have all the things. If you want to follow me, I assume mostly you know where I'm at. JeGaysus on all platforms. I think it's easier when you're coming to my show. You know what I mean? And then outside of that, I think I'm going to turn this into a podcast, audio only, in addition to the YouTube recording. So ratings are important. If you're listening to this on a Spotify or an Apple setting, make sure to rate the show. And then if you're just on the regular YouTube looking at our gorgeous faces, thank you for your likes, and please subscribe. We're going to try to make this a thing. I don't know. One day maybe I could travel to the UK and do this in person and like do a little documentary walking around like this is where my church was. Like that would be my dream, is to do this in person.
Oh yes. I could show you some spots.
All right. Well then we'll put that in the books for 2025. That's our goal. Thank you so much for coming on. Bye.
Bye.